Well, everybody, welcome to Relationship Matters. I can't believe it, but it's actually season 2. I kind of I kind of ventured into this thing just feeling like we needed to have some honest, authentic conversations about relationships. Our
Hmm.
world is in crisis. Relationships are getting busted up all over the place. And I know in my own coaching practice and my own speaking and being out and seeing people and seeing the pain, that there's nobody, relationships are one of those things that we kind of take for granted. We don't really talk about a lot. And so I wanted to start a podcast to actually start talking about relationships and maybe bring some real good dialogue. So last season was really successful. I had a lot of great feedback that they felt like there was real tools in the conversations that they could take and apply. And so this season we're going deeper. I wanted to go even deeper into the subjects and whatnot. And so I've got some incredible guests this year, starting with my good friend, David Ruis.
Hey.
Welcome, David. I love that you're here.
It's
David
great
Ruis,
to be here.
Yeah. And David Ruis and his wife, Anita, have been planting churches and have been in various leadership spaces within the nonprofit and faith community for over 30 years. They have 4 children who were with them for many of the adventures that they had planting churches, both in Canada and the USA. The Ruises have also been a significant contributors in the development of Nepali churches that are part of the Global Vineyard Community. Much of the Ruis focus has been on indigenous settings, working with people experiencing poverty and subsequent marginalization. David has had a significant experience facilitating leadership development, and on a creative side, he is a well-respected worship leader, songwriter. You're worthy of praise. Every move I make, I mean, these are songs I grew up singing when I came to the Lord.
Well, don't date me too much here, brother.
Yeah, I'll try not to. And he's published author of 2 books, which I want to get my hands on because I want to read them. The Worship God is Seeking and The Justice God is Seeking. I love that. David and Anita currently wear a couple of hats with Vineyard in the Vineyard context, and they are national directors of Vineyard Canada, along with being the team lead for a local Vineyard church in Kelowna. And best of all, they are my pastors. David, that's quite the introduction, but it's true.
Yeah.
You have written songs that impacted the world and the church for many years, but I think actually you're better known in my heart for the justice, the heart of justice to reaching people that are marginalized and that people seem to want to ignore or don't know what to say or don't know what to do. And you and Anita have just modeled that so well. And I'm just so proud to call you guys friends and to have you as pastors. I told somebody the other day, I said, man, my pastor is just amazing. And it's for so many years I was the pastor. So I
totally.
Yeah. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, this is great. Great. Love what you're up to, Mark. It's I'm glad that first season was great. And I'm really delighted to help you launch this second one here.
Yeah, I wanted you to be the first guest because, last season I had somebody very near and dear to me as the first guest. And when I was thinking about it for this year, I just thought, you know what, I got to start with David because you have really, you and Anita have just welcomed Sandy and I into your hearts and home and family so freely. And I think that, we talk about relationships and we talk about relational equity. And a lot of times people will talk relational. They'll talk about community, family, being our community, our church community is a family. But companies talk about that, organizations, we're a family and whatnot. But we don't always behave like we're a family. We don't always actually jump on it. I always say we need to take the values from the wall to the heart and write them on the heart.
Great.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to dive in today with you talking about what it's like you've led so many organizations and leading those organizations like on the edge of helping people in the worst time of their lives, like the when you've worked with the poor, abject poverty, and then you've also got a team you got to lead. You have a family you're raising, and now you're in a context where you have international responsibilities, you have national responsibilities, and here you are. I was blown away in a local church context. We started going after stepped away from pastoring,
Yep.
and here you are going out of your way to have Sandy and I over, to building relationship, and I'm thinking, how does this guy do it? So maybe just
Mm,
talk on a broad brushstroke to begin with, just your experiences and why relationships are so important to
mm.
you.
Yeah, man, I'm tracking with you totally. Oh, do I have a bit of an echo happening here, bro? Or are
No,
you okay?
I think
Okay.
you're good.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's gone. Boy, such a massive like it's so
I
simple
know.
and yet it's so vast.
Right.
Like you said, I'm tracking with you 100%. It's like, yeah, getting the value off the wall into your heart. I think so much part of our challenge is you have to prioritize it in a very rubber meets the road, boots on the ground kind of a
Yeah.
way, because I think we're swimming in cultural waters
Mm,
that actually pit us against authentic, deep relationships.
right.
Everything's moving fast. Everything is success oriented. There's particular metrics in any organization for what marks you're hitting, what goals you're setting, etc. And rarely do they, rarely can they slow down enough and give enough room and space for relationships to really matter.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think why it's such a value, and I think if you can hang in there long enough, you can see that the long trajectories and the long play of relationship gets you in way better stead for legacy, for sustainability, for longevity, even for the negotiating and trying to discern the use of resource, whether that's
Right.
financial or human resource or whatever. It's critical. And honestly, I'm just going to be a huge statement here.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not an expert on this stuff, but I think what we're finding coming up underneath us, sort of as Gen Zs and millennials are hitting the marketplace, hitting various organizations, we're realizing, oh my word,
Yeah.
the structures that we've used and the way that we've facilitated relationship
Yeah.
as a means to an end versus an end in itself. And if relationships are healthy, everything will flourish from there. These it seems like at least a massive swath of those generational waves. They're just going done
Mm,
with it. Just
yeah. Yeah.
I don't care about banking the amount of hours. I don't care about this. I want true, authentic relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slowing down and making space is critical.
Yeah, and you hit on such an important point there, because I think what happens is we're victims of our own success.
Yeah,
We tap into something that resonates with people, resonates with the community, resonates with, and we get so busy doing it that eventually the organization, the vision has to start serving the organization instead
yeah,
of
exactly.
organization serving the vision. And
Yeah.
I think I've been thinking lately, coming out of COVID especially, we're starting to see that smaller is better again. We're starting to
Mm,
come back to that, like, what if we just had a lot of small instead of like one big? And
yeah.
and I think that would help, because listen, it's authentic for a lot of people when you get so busy. That's why I wanted to talk to you about this subject, because David, you have international connections. I mean, you fly, your air miles. You must have like 1 million air miles, because you
Not
fly
quite.
all
Getting
across
there.
the country, all across the world, and yet you still have an incredible ability to maintain relationships and keep relationships. And I think it's exactly what you said. It's because you prioritize them. You truly value them. It's not just a marker of trying to get people to follow. And
Right.
and so how can you, like, if there's leaders listening today and they're leading an organization and they're feeling overwhelmed with busyness, how do they shift that? How do they
Mm,
start the move back to the relational model?
mm. Wow, boy, that's a massive,
I
massive question. Yeah, as we've already said, the prioritizing, but what does that look like
Yeah,
practically? I
yeah,
think it's just making well, and it's always attention, right? Because there is an aspect of self-care. If you've
yeah,
drained yourself so much that you have nothing to give, then everything still becomes plastic and inauthentic.
right.
Or you do end up manipulating and using people without wanting to, even because you're just
Yeah,
you're just drained, you're tired.
Yeah.
What I try to do is just build into the rhythms, uh, the personal time, but I don't know, realizing that there is something of your own soul that gets fed if you can just slow down enough,
Right.
and it's discerning whether, whether that one person, um, yeah, you might need just to take an extra 15 minutes, an extra hour, an extra whatever, just to sit with one person. It gives authentic, it gives integrity
Yeah.
to the rest of everything that you're trying to organize or lead or speak into
Right.
or give vision to. So I don't know if I'm really, man, drilling it. It's
I know, right? This is
more
a
an art than a science. That's the
no,
problem. For me,
right.
a huge influence on me is just observing what I can through the writings of what would be known as the Gospels in the New Testament.
Right.
Kind of the capacity of Jesus to be able to pivot in a moment, spend time with one person at the side of a well, a
Mm,
woman, that was just basically an outcast of society. But because he spent time with her, his ultimate mission was fulfilled in a much powerful way. She
right.
became the mouthpiece and the one that went back to her village and turned the whole thing around,
Right.
because she didn't because Jesus had been able to give her that attention. Then you find him in another moment, he's in front of literal thousands of people in a
Right.
massive crowd, and yet sees one kid who's the
Mm,
story is familiar with those of us of the Christian tradition. I think, where he's just got these meager little resources, a couple fish and a couple loaves, and
yeah.
Jesus, now with miraculous power, obviously leverages that, and it becomes what feeds the entire
Right.
multitude of people. And yet it was still the small
Mm,
like what you said earlier, it was the small impacting the
right.
large. There's something about inclusion. So
Yeah.
it's not everybody necessarily getting into agreement. I think vision, we're learning,
Mm,
is not just the raw rally to run up the mountain. It's trust.
yeah.
It's that sense of trust.
You
So
bet.
whether I'm doing a seminar or sitting with one person, how do I build trust? So if I'm in a part of the world
Yeah.
where I've never been before, and you leverage what's around you. So
Yeah.
you get in the taxi, you're driving from the airport to a venue. Let's say it's a setting, where there's a seminar setting, or you're
Yeah.
engaging with people that you probably never met before. I will spend that entire drive, most of the time,
Yeah.
absolutely picking that driver's brain about where I am.
Right.
What's going on in your country right now? What's the vibe in the city?
Mm,
What's some of your favorite spots to see? So when you start having conversation,
right.
even with people you've never met before, you're able to pull on all kinds of things that you've not only
Yeah.
observed, but you've intentionally been curious about. I
Right.
think curiosity is a massive part of relationship. If you can
Yeah.
cultivate a sense of curiosity, then you'll listen a lot better. You'll listen with some intent,
Mm,
and you're listening so that you're connecting with those that you're connecting with.
yeah.
So even in a larger organization, or at times when you just got to do a big staff meeting or whatever, if you can anchor it to right where people are at,
Yeah.
and be calling them, from within the space they're in. So they
Yeah.
don't have to disengage from their life to enter your organization, or they don't have to
So good.
disengage from their lives in order to fulfill the mission that you're all called to together.
Wow.
Whether that's in the marketplace, whether that's in the religious sphere, whether it's in
Yep.
the virtual space, just trying to, it's kind of like what you're doing with these podcasts, which I love. It's kind of, what, we'll have a sense of direction. We're not going to overscript the thing. We'll just
Yep.
kind of let the conversation will find its own water level.
Right.
And so what you have to be brutally honest about, though,
Yeah.
is not everybody can enter the same depth of relationship in that space,
Yes.
but you can create a sense of connection. So you
Right.
have to manage expectations,
Yeah. Your
but
own
at
and
the
theirs.
see that what's that, Mark? Yeah.
Your own expectations and their
And
expectations.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a both and. So you're
Yeah.
not, it's that classic thing, and I know it sounds so simple, but I think in relationships it really does matter, where you under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so much of our culture, particularly when we get pressured in the organizational spheres, we do the thing, the schmoozing,
Yeah.
and we know how to, like,
Yeah.
you can pull off enough of those skills, but again, before
Yeah.
long it rings hollow, and then people can't hang, and
Yeah.
especially in this day and age.
Yeah. I want to circle back for a moment and point out something you said just for takeaways for people. And that is that story of the feeding of the 5,000. The other
Mm,
critical thing of that wasn't just the miraculous of the multiplication, but it's actually each person had to take some and give some in order for
right,
all 5,000 to be fed. And we know all
right,
5,000 were fed because there was 12 baskets left over. And so there's a real message in there about the relational model in organizations is that each person is responsible to build relationship and that connection that you talk about.
right,
And if
right.
everybody can get that, even whatever level it's at, I might have the
Yep.
capacity to only have a 2 or 3 deeper
Yes.
connections, but maybe the next person has the capacity for 10 or 11. I don't, we're
Yeah.
all different that way.
Yeah.
But if we
Exactly.
all buy in and we all, like that situation, and the other thing is the situational awareness. That's the other thing you pointed out. So by going smaller and letting more people drive the relational things and
Hmm.
adding situational awareness where you realize and be aware of yourself and aware of the
Right.
around you. I just love that, David. You do that really well. That's exactly
Mm,
what you do. You have the
mm.
ability to kind of see what's going on in the room and then zero in on the person that needs that connection or needs
Yeah.
and that is so powerful what you just said. So I
Mm.
wanted to make sure we highlighted it. So one, give some and share some and receive some. And the second is be situational awareness, have
Yeah.
self-awareness and others
Yeah.
awareness and seize the moment.
Yeah.
Take that time. Don't be
Yeah.
thinking 16 things down the road. Just be present. I call it the power of presence.
Yeah.
When
Exactly.
when you're just present
100%.
and you're with that person, it could be 5 minutes and they feel like they're important. They feel like
Yeah.
you've connected with them, and I
Yeah.
think that's part of it.
Yeah. Then I think from an organizational standpoint, if you think about,
Yeah.
um, a lot of times we're really excited when we get clarity about our purpose or our why,
Yeah.
or the vision, which, as we all know, is such a critical component of sustainability in any
Right.
organizational system. But then our tendency is we immediately move to the infrastructural pieces of that,
Yeah.
to pull the thing together and then plug people into that structure, instead of giving the vision enough room to breathe and pay attention to the culture you're creating. So if you
Right.
want a relational organization, you have to create and curate a culture that actually allows for relationship.
Yes.
And then the structural pieces will serve not just the vision, but they'll serve the relationships that are coming together to make the vision take place.
Right.
And that just takes, again, intentionality
Yeah.
and the ability to pivot. You might be in a staff meeting and you realize, someone on the team just needs even just a few moments of extra attention, or
Yeah.
don't just blow by the relational stuff to get to the more
Yes.
practical and administrative things. I love, again, in the Christian tradition. I think sometimes we miss this. Administration is actually buried in a list that St. Paul gives as a list of spiritual gifts, and he puts administration in that list. I think that's a real intentional thing to go. It's not just the structural bits; it's the spirit of a man, the spirit
Yeah.
of a woman, that whole the awareness of the whole
Mm.
person.
Yeah.
And so again, sometimes it's hard, to bleed those things, or find where those overlaps are. There is sometimes a 9 to 5 clock, for better
Yeah.
term. How much can you bleed life into business? But at the same time, if we don't give room for real people, we're going to end up with something really cold. And again, I don't think
Mm.
it'll sustain us into
Yeah.
the next waves of wherever we're heading as humanity. It's just not going to work.
It's true.
So yeah, so I think seeing yourself as an organizational leader, you're curating a culture. So that's where some of the, real successful business models, take those kinds of things into account. It wasn't just a checklist of, oh, we should, maybe have more of an open space rather than just cubicles.
Right.
Maybe we should introduce some you're actually curating an atmosphere that will legit facilitate relationship. But you got to have the resiliency and flexibility in the organization to pivot when you need
Yeah.
to give attention to what's going on in people's lives, not just are you striking your marks or your goals,
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like rather than the organization being transactional, it needs to be relational.
I think
And
so.
I think that's yeah, I think that's tipping into another really good point is that if your leadership style, your leadership, we all have different personalities, but
Right.
if you lean in that leadership is primarily relational, it's
Mm,
not transactional, that
right.
would help you start to actually be relational even when there's a transactional requirement.
Yes.
You approach it relationally, you're
Yeah.
going to have a much better outcome.
Yeah.
And I think you'll have people that want to, they'll buy in,
Yeah.
they'll discover it. I think the problem is too often we say, what I always say, integrity is who you say you are versus who you actually are. And if
Yeah.
those two are meeting, you're good.
Yeah.
But if we say we're something and we don't actually do it, now
Yeah.
we have an integrity gap. And so
Yeah.
a lot
That's
of
so right.
organizations overpromise and underdeliver
Yeah.
because they're making promises based on who they say they are, but they're actually not living it out.
Yeah.
And
That's really good.
I think that's key in what you're
Yep.
saying there.
Yep. Yeah. It makes me think too about something I think we're learning over the, sort of these last couple decades. A couple things come to my mind. One is that task assignment is not leadership development.
Ooh, that's a good one. Say it
And
again.
so,
Task,
yeah,
task
task
assignment,
assignment is not leadership development. So it's like
mic
this
drop.
thing of, the apprentice versus the just the lackey,
Yeah,
or that type of a thing. And I think,
yeah,
by and large, again, these are way over generalizations, but kind of the whole sort of wave of boomers, that came out of World War II, that sort of a thing. Everything was so task oriented and designed to never let disaster happen again. We're going to have the biggest bank accounts we have. We're going to have the most, the biggest footprint in the business world or the church world or whatever you want to call it. And that's going to buttress us against any future changes
mm,
or any disasters or, just all the psyche, particularly coming out of World War II. And what ended up happening is we could never let go of what we had because you want to hold it secure, and
right.
you're not developing people. You're just having organizational tasks that
Yeah,
get accomplished. And the way you move up in the organization is if you complete the right amount of tasks.
yeah,
And then we wonder why we've got, you know, shallow character, we don't have commitment, loyalty, any of those things
yeah.
because it's not about that. And with that kind of that thing of the task assignments, not leadership development, is on the leadership side. I think particularly the more influence we have in an organization, I think
Mhm.
we need to courageously own when the impact of our decisions, our style, uh, even one word to a staff member or whatever. If it doesn't matter what our intent was, we have to own our impact.
Mm,
And I
yeah,
feel that thing is just inverting. Well, I
yeah,
never intended to do that, so you think you got a free pass, or it
right,
wasn't my intent to inflict that wounding on a person
right.
or an organ. It you know what? That's not good enough anymore.
I
you
agree.
know, and
I
we need to be
totally agree.
aware so that we're not we're not killing each other.
Yeah,
But if we can own impact, not just intent,
yeah.
then I think the whole society moves forward in a
Oh,
lot better way. It's probably some of the stuff we're learning, and I mean, I know there's all kinds of various opinions within this, but just journeying through some of the truth and reconciliation stuff in
yeah.
in the First Nation, Métis, Inuit picture, apart from the politics of it all and everything, can we own our impact?
Yes.
And when we get sketchy on, you realize the impact hasn't been good, you tend to double down on what your intention was,
Right.
and
Right.
that becomes your defense. And
Yeah.
it's like, I
Or you
think
deflect to somebody else and blame them.
100%.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you have to drill into some conspiracy to find
Yeah.
out whose intent it was to end up with this mess. Like so you just, again, it doesn't allow you to actually engage
Wow.
together
Yeah.
with people. And so it's not owning anything you shouldn't own. It's
Okay.
not a weak posture in that sense of
Mhm.
of just bending to every whim and will, but you're courageously stepping in and going, I'm resilient enough.
Yeah.
And it's for the sake of the health of the organization. I'm gonna own
Well,
my stuff.
and for the sake of healthy relationships.
Exactly.
Because this
Exactly.
will translate into families, it will translate into organizations, it'll
100%.
translate into customers internally and externally.
Yeah.
Our coworkers is internal and
Yeah.
this translates into every area of life. And I've been saying it a lot lately to as I've been teaching my relationship stuff. But my greatest growth in my life was when I did two things, same coin, two sides of the coin. The first one was take responsibility for my actions and I love that your word better, take responsibility for my impact. And the second side of that coin was stop taking responsibility for other people's impact. In other
There
words,
you go. That's
in
good.
other words, I didn't let guilt or shame drive me
Right.
anymore.
Right.
I just took responsibility and it freed me. We have this
Yeah.
idea if we take responsibility that we get defensive because it exposes our shame or
Yeah,
our guilt
exactly.
but actually taking responsibility frees you from shame and guilt. And
So
so
true.
and so I think in relationally speaking, it's the same thing.
Mm.
I can say to my wife, well, I didn't mean to hurt you that way. Get over it. Or I can take responsibility and say, honey, I'm so sorry I sent that relational
Yeah.
message.
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to feel like you're loved and cared for and
Yeah.
whatnot. And it changed our marriage when I started
Yeah.
to take responsibility. And so
Yeah.
you're tapping into something so deep here, David,
Mm.
because I think that this is at the core of the problem in our society, even with the homeless and the truth and reconciliation, all these things. People are looking for solutions,
Yeah. 100%.
task orientated
Yep.
solutions, and they're not looking at just building relationships and
That's
just
it.
connecting with people. And
Yeah.
they're our neighbors. These aren't them and us. I hate
Yeah,
the
that's
other's
good.
language.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
this is we
Yeah.
we are neighbors. We need
Yeah.
to love one another and we need to
Yeah.
take responsibility for the impact
Mm.
that's happened. That means, though, the other side of that coin is it doesn't mean I take responsibility for somebody's drug addiction. It
Exactly. Yeah.
it means I take responsibility for my judgment of them for
Yeah,
the
exactly.
drug
Yeah.
addiction or my
Yeah.
incapacity to help or to love
Right.
somebody or be kind to
Right.
somebody.
Right.
I
Right.
arrived at my office the other day and I had a guy sleeping in my doorway. I couldn't get in. And I asked him, hey, could you, move on or whatever. And then I noticed he had a cart with some bottles in it. And I said, hey, can I give you some empties? I've got some empties here. Plus, would you like a couple of waters just to take with you to drink today? And he was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, man, like, thank you." Like, he was so surprised that I was nice to him because as soon
Yeah.
as I said, "Hey, buddy, sorry, I gotta get into my office here," and he's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm moving right away. I'm sorry, don't call the police." Like, he was really
Yeah.
defensive right away, and I just
Yeah.
said, "No, no, let me
Yeah.
let me send you away with something."
Right. Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah,
think, on that side of things, again, I think it works in all sorts of relational spheres, but
yeah,
we've always just tried to say the end game is always relationship. So the
yes,
first encounter with someone, it just might be just merciful. Like, so what?
right, yeah,
But if you run into that person again, now I can start moving towards
yeah,
exactly what you even did in the first encounter with, this exchange. But then if you keep running into that person or somehow you end up journeying an aspect of life together, now from the place of trust and friendship,
mhm,
not just because you're breaking a rule in the organization, from the
Right.
place of trust and friendship, you can go, you know what, dude? Like, this doesn't help any of us when you do
Yeah.
A, B, C, or D. And if
Right.
you keep making those decisions, like our relationship is getting shattered
It's being
here, and
affected. Yeah.
it's being affected, and it might impact the way we're able to walk forward together.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's so you keep bringing it back again, as you were saying, and I think
Yeah.
we're both saying, to that relational space. So you might have to end up with some really hard decisions, but it's
Yeah.
not a transaction as much as it is discovering a way forward.
Right.
And one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it's kind of bringing this up even as you're talking, and I'm beginning to see, I think it really applies to a lot of decision making at all
Mhm.
levels of an organization, whether again that's within the faith community or not. Um, we're actually searching for wisdom.
Mm.
This old story, which I
Right.
believe is a true story, of Solomon, one of the first kings of Israel, David's son, third king of Israel, I guess. He's kind of in this space and he's praying, and it's like he kind of, it's all, it's not like this, but just for the sake of a wide
Yeah.
audience, it's almost like Aladdin, getting the lamp. Okay, if you could
Right.
just,
Yeah.
but he didn't have three wishes. It's like, if you could just wish for one thing, if
Yeah.
God's standing there and he'll give you your answer, or the genie pops out of the bottle, what
Yeah.
would you ask for? And he's like, wisdom.
Yeah.
And he ended up creating an incredible atmosphere, politically, religiously, economically. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the snapshots we get in some of the ancient writings in the Old Testament, there were at least some
Yeah.
really significant seasons of an unbelievable prosperity and peace
Yeah.
that happened. But it's because there was a leader at the helm who wasn't just trying to find the answer; he was looking for wisdom.
Right.
And I just did pop up on my screen here, the half brother of Jesus writes about wisdom, and it's interesting how it does come around to relationship. He goes, "Who is wise and understanding? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom.
Wow.
But if you have envy and selfish ambition, you're going to it's going to create all kinds of contention." And it says there's disorder and every kind of wickedness, really, and the
Right.
whole community starts crumbling and falling down, the whole organization. But
Yeah.
if you can lean into wisdom and you lean into uh relational equity versus
Yeah.
transactional decisions,
Yes.
you actually, so you might not have the 5-year plan yet,
Yeah.
but you will know the next step for the organization.
Yeah.
And if you've already created a relational culture, most of the time, and it depends on, it depends on how nasty your board of directors are in whatever setting you're in. But most of the time, they'll allow for the pumping of the brakes a bit to
Yeah.
just find the next step.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you can just get that next step and minimize relational fallout,
Mm.
then you'll get the long-term vision. You'll
Yeah.
get the long-term plan.
Yeah.
But you're going for wisdom more than you're going for answers.
Yeah. And even wisdom, asking for wisdom in your relationships. I
Yeah.
often tell people, like, ask for wisdom in your relationships, and
Yes.
when you have relationship wisdom, then you know what to do. You have the awareness, because I always say awareness gives you choice. So when you
Mm,
have situational wisdom for a relationship, you actually
right.
you'll be able to bring healing instead of destruction or
Yeah.
division. And
Yeah.
so I agree with you, and I think that that's key. What you're saying is key for organizations and families, actually, to keep unity in
Yeah.
the family, is we
Yeah.
must hold relationship above circumstance, above
Right.
transaction,
Right.
above everything else. I often say we have three primary relationships: one with God, one with ourselves, and one with others.
Yeah.
When one of those is out of sorts, the rest
Yeah.
are out of sorts.
Yeah.
And so people like, well, this intentional investment in your relationships will actually be a longer road, but it'll be a more solid one, and it'll get you further in
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
and I think that is where organizations fall down. I think like I say, we're victims of our own success sometimes, and then we're forced into this, like, just trying to keep up or catch up, and
Yeah,
we
so
just
true.
don't value. So I think you're right. I think we need to establish, or leaders, if there's something we can, like a takeaway for a leader here today, another takeaway would be, make sure that you hold relationships above everything else, and above that have wisdom. Ask,
Yes, and yeah, or they're yoke fellows. It's that they're
yes,
the two ox that are pulling
yeah,
the plow the right direction. Yeah, I know
great
we're getting
illustration.
close to our time here, but it just make it
Yeah.
drill it down into like a family context. I think what we're talking about allows for then it's what is relationally what's the words we're looking for here? We're not scripted, Mark. Uh
Yes.
we're not relationally or we're look one relationship doesn't get pit against another.
You're right.
So decisions now are about it is about the long term, but it also is about the moment. Just a quick
Yes.
story, as you said,
Yeah.
it ebbs and flows for me. I'm heading into another season of significant travel, but I was in a lot of multiple locations around the world,
Mhm.
partly sort of the business side on music as well as what I was doing in faith communities. But um, so it was the turn of the century, big thing. New Year's is coming up. It's a
Yeah.
whole long story I
Yeah.
could unpack here, but I ended up at the end of a lot of just processing. I had all kinds of opportunities. There was a particular gathering in Europe that I was invited to be a part of with a lot of pressure to go from all sorts of avenues. It seemed like the best strategic decision from a career standpoint as well as a influence
Yeah.
impacting standpoint.
Right.
But I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it. I just couldn't get peace about it would be language
Right.
that I
Yeah.
would use in my own journey and how I
Yeah.
believe I'm obedient to the Lord and true to myself. So I was in this conundrum. Ended up just saying no to everything. And I really thought something amazing was we were living in Winnipeg, Manitoba at the time. I thought something maybe really incredible would happen as far as what my life was about. And I ended up on New Year's Eve sitting on the edge of my second daughter's bed, and she was wide awake. And she looks up at me and she says, "Dad, I'm so, so glad you stayed home this New Year's. I was
Wow.
praying and praying and praying to Jesus that you'd just be home with me." And
Oh.
it was like this whole all of a sudden I realized it's all the same. It all one
Mm.
thing, if it was the right decision to be in Europe at that time, engaged in there was a recording that came out of that event that to this day is still the number one Christian selling European worship album
Wow.
on the books. Like from I could have been on that,
Right.
but I was by my daughter's bedside, and I'll tell you what,
Mm.
to be able to hold those things and value them the same,
Right.
and I'm not saying I do this right all the time, and you're pulled and all of that, but so wisdom dictated that I
Yeah.
needed to be there with my daughter.
Yeah, and
Um,
you listen to that peace inside. You listened,
exactly.
you got the wisdom, but you also
Yep.
followed the wisdom,
Yep.
and you will never have gotten that moment back with her.
Never. Yep.
Never, because of the significance of her
Yep.
request and desire, and the
Yep.
timing and all that kind of stuff. You would have
Yep.
never gotten that back. And I
Nope.
think, boy, what a great illustration of what we're talking about.
It's
We can
it's
apply that to everything we do.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And and then I think, an old mentor of mine who died some years ago already, but a guy named John Wimber, he sat me down once and he said, "David, I want to tell you something. Opportunity does not always equal God's will for you.
Right.
If you're gifted, you got all the chops, there's going to be tons. So don't be driven just by opportunity."
Yeah.
And if you realize you're valued, you're comfortable in your own skin, you're
Yeah.
going for everything you have, but you recognize I am not indispensable.
Mm.
That event went on without me, and it was an
Yeah.
amazing event.
Yeah.
It didn't need me. Sometimes we overvalue
Yeah.
our need in the organizational structure. We're needed as a
Right.
human being faithful to the relationships around us more than we are to sustain a structure
Wow.
or an institution. And if we can get that straight, I think then we can make those types of decisions, because it's not which one is better or worse, it's which one is right in this moment.
Yes. Yeah.
And the relationship is at the center
So,
of it.
so you've just pointed out a third ox. So we have 3 oxes pulling the cart.
Yeah, we got a triple ox cart here. Yeah.
We have a triple ox cart. The third ox is humility.
Exactly. Yeah.
That took humility, David, to let go of an opportunity to do what was right for the moment relationally. I think takes tremendous amount of humility. And I think leaders today need to have more wisdom, more humility, and put relationships first.
Yeah.
It's a 3 ox cart that we've got here. If you want to see your organization move forward, if you want to see your family move forward,
exactly.
if you want to see your faith move forward, humble yourself, ask for wisdom, and hold the relationships above everything else.
Beautiful. You summarized it. Great. Perfect.
What a great conversation, David. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I liked it.
We had no script, folks. This is just, and by the way, when David and I do get together, this is kind of how our conversations go too.
That's right. It's really true.
In fact, one time I think we were at your guys' place. I said, "Man, we should have recorded this conversation."
Yeah.
It was so
unless
good.
if we're talking about the Seahawks versus the Chiefs, then it's a different. Then it ends up in a totally different place.
Yeah, that's when we have to hold our relationship above the.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
There you go.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. This was just really rich. Folks, if you want to know and connect with David more, vineyard.ca is the website for Vineyard Canada, but also you can also, of course,
you need an E on that. It's
did I leave it out again?
Yeah,
man, I did that. I got a funny story about that, but I won't tell it now. I'll tell you when we see you, but I keep forgetting the E in there.
It's because we say vineyard instead of vineyard.
I know, but it's really a vineyard. But there, look at that. Fixed it that quick.
It's better than barnyard. So
yeah. But let me just say this: if you're somebody looking for connection, you're looking for maybe you're in a crisis yourself and you just need some help, hit up Vineyard Canada and then look. It'll have local churches you can find on there, and find a local leader just to connect with. And I know that they would help you. And if you want to connect with David and his music and other things, then you just Google David Ruis. He's world famous. You'll find him.
There'll be some weird stuff out there too, I'm sure. But.
Well, there could be, but I'm sure there's not. You're a great guy, and I really appreciate you, David. And
mutual.
So we've got season 2, episode 1 in the can. This is going to be launched October 20th. So you are going to be able to, the premiere is going to go in a couple of days here, and we are going to be able to enjoy. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Make sure you comment, make sure you tag. And listen, if you have a friend or a family member who is a leader of an organization, a leader of a business, or somebody you just think would benefit from this conversation, please share this video, share it out, let people know that that this conversation took place, because I think it's really important. I think what David said today is so critical to organizational health and family health that that I really encourage you to share this out and to comment, add your thoughts to the conversation. If you have questions or you need to reach out, you can always reach me at markgordon.ca and reach out to me anytime that way as well. And thanks, David. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Really good.
Take care. Have a great day.
All right, man. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.